both at the same time. You ready?
Okay, you go.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Remind podcast. I'm Dr. Ashleigh Moreland and I am joined by my co-host David Masterton, and today we are going to talk about triggers and taking the bait. So this is something that we have obviously both encountered relentlessly throughout our lives, and also something that I work with on a daily basis with clients as well. And I have never, ever, ever met a single human being who doesn't have triggers and who doesn't either consciously, knowingly, or most commonly unconsciously take the bait. And we're going to dive into that today. So, oh my gosh, Dave, talk about got him.
And for those who've clicked on the thumbnail because it's going to be talking about fishing, maybe not.
Yeah.
We're talking about taking the bait when it comes to, well, I suppose it's like the catalyst of an argument, or catalyst of a trigger, or a catalyst of something where you go, I wish I could have a do-over on that one, or maybe not.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack on this one, because I can feel a lot of dad jokes coming along, but I'll try and refrain for the viewers or the listeners, whichever way you're going.
Yeah.
But I guess at the start of all of this, it's a bit like dancing. It requires two.
Yeah, totally. This is the funniest thing out of everything when I work with people who there's a lot of conflict, or there's a lot of arguing or something in their relationships or in their lives. I'll say, okay, but if the other person said the exact same things to a brick wall, would you still call that an argument? And they'll go, no. I'll say, why? Well, because the wall can't argue back. I go, exactly. They just become a crazy person yelling at a brick wall, don't they? And so I found that to be really, really powerful in helping people to understand the role that they play in co-creating an argument or conflict or drama in any way, because us simply even being present for it is contributing to it. Because if we weren't there and they said the exact same things and things played out exactly the same way, it's not an argument anymore. It's just a weirdo yelling at a brick wall. And so I find that a really, really powerful way to help people to understand contribution, because it does take two. It always takes two. Yeah.
I'm picturing dominoes. Because for someone to, we'll say, bait you. Now, there's two forms of baiting. There's the unconscious baiting, because it's sort of like, I'm triggered, I'm annoyed, I'm going to lash out at you. That triggers you, then that goes there. But then there's the other bit, which is baiting. I want to get a reaction out of you. I want to control you like a puppet. And so when I'm baiting you, I'm consciously doing it because I just want to get a reaction out of you because of control, manipulation, narcissism, whichever, insert issue here. But we'll sort of, at the start, we'll stick with the general bait of reacting to someone in a way that's not necessarily, well, if you had to think about it for your highest good or your highest self, is this reaction aligned with that, or is this reaction in alliance with, you're not get the better of me, you're not going to beat me, who the fuck do you think you are to talk to me that way? You can go take a long walk off a short pier. You can, all of these, these kind of triggers.
Big one for me is, how dare you?
Ooh.
That's one where when I feel that how dare you kind of energy in me, or I start having those how dare you thoughts, that's when I'm like, oh, okay, let me just get that hook right out of my cheek.
Ooh, this one's going to hurt. This one's going to leave a little blood, this one. But the funny thing is, your trigger from someone else is not without a trigger from that person. So in a nutshell, either they've been triggered by someone else, or they've projected onto a situation and seen something that is unhealed that's then triggered them, or you've done something that has triggered them knowingly or unknowingly, or again through whatever wounding that they've come across, they've been triggered. Now this is no different to, this is different to not accepting unreasonable behaviour. You're allowed to set standards. You're allowed to set boundaries when it comes to unreasonable behaviour. You're not taking the bait if you sort of go, okay, you've done that, that's fine, but I'm not engaging, and these are what I'm going to do in the future. Whether that be set a boundary, cut someone out of your life, tell them you're not behaving properly, I'm not going to tolerate that, and then walk away. And some people will sort of judge, well, what's the difference? Well, if you say that and you're yelling at them, is that triggered?
Yeah.
It could be. Yeah.
It's the energy behind it.
It's the energy. It's the intention. I want to yell at you to make me feel big or make you feel small. But if you can say it in a calm way, that's one sign. Or you can have someone who is absolutely manipulative and says it calmly, but they're building up in a chess-style game as to find a way to bait you at some point.
Yeah.
So whether it's tone, it can or can't be, but you've just nailed it. It's energy and it's intention. And those things never lie. But sometimes, if you're not tuned in, it's very hard to read, because all you can read is the physical, the body language, all of that. So taking the bait.
Yeah, it's really big. I feel like the first thing when it comes to that is, for me, understanding what a trigger is, right? So when I teach this in Rise and Thrive, I usually get out like all these props and I'll have salt, I'll have chili, I'll have water. I've got all these props. And it's really helpful for people to have a visual representation of what triggers look and feel like, because, you know, when I talk about this, I'll say, okay, I'll use the salt and wound analogy to begin with. And if I had a gaping wound on my hand and salt got poured onto that, it's going to hurt like hell. And so that's what we would call a trigger. But if I had healthy skin and there was no wound there to begin with, that exact same salt does nothing more than exfoliate my skin. It does nothing. It doesn't actually activate anything. It doesn't cause pain or discomfort or anything at all. It simply just is. It's like, oh, okay, that's salt. Now, what I
preparing
find...
for a tequila shot. That's what salt in the hand.
Yeah, exactly. What I find, I guess, at a worldly level is this entitlement and actually really disempowered state of society that says, I'm completely unconsciously, you need to change your salt into water so that you don't hurt me anymore. And that's completely disempowered, because if you took water onto that gaping wound, it's not going to hurt like the salt. So all of a sudden your wounding is safe. Now, that's the salt and wound analogy. But where that falls over for me is that sometimes imagine the hottest chili or some kind of caustic, chemical. If I poured hot chili, the hottest, most hardcore chili, onto bare skin, that might hurt like hell. And if that hurts like hell, well then, regardless of whether I have a wound or not, that is harmful. And so I feel like the first step is actually understanding that a trigger can be something that actually is just nothing more than an invitation. It's salt. It's not necessarily toxic or harmful or malicious. It simply is something in our environment that is pointing to a wound within us that without that, we never would have known it was there. Like sometimes I've, put my hands in something and gone, oh, I didn't know I had that little cut next to my, where the skin has peeled off around my fingernails. Oh, that stung a little bit. I wasn't expecting that. So kind of thinking about it like that, of going, well, I have wounds within me that unless something happens in my environment that points to those wounds, I never even know they're there. And one of my favorite examples of this is when my husband and I were playing card games. We're playing Uno one night, and what are you throwing away? We were playing Uno one night, and he kicked my butt 3 rounds in a row. One game was like 35 cards in my hand by the time we finished. And the
idea is to get the cards on the table, right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
To have none left. And so I lost 3 times in a row and didn't just lose a little bit. It was like absolute butt kicking. And I felt this trauma response start happening in my body. And I was like angry and hurt, and I wanted to stop playing. I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to go and brush my teeth. I don't want to play anymore. Oh, how old was I in that moment? But he was like, whoa, what just happened? Like, we were just playing cards and having a really good time. What's coming up for you right now? And when I actually sat in my body, I was like, oh my gosh, it's not safe for me to lose. When I was a kid, I'd get an absolute butt whooping if I lost, because that's what motivated me to be better. And it was all in the name of like helping me be better and helping me improve and all that sort of stuff. But it meant that it wasn't safe for me to lose. And so that trauma, that wounding was still stored in my body. Us playing a game of Uno, completely not malicious, no actual threat whatsoever. It was simply just the catalyst that pointed to the unresolved wound in me. But if we had have never played that, and if that had never have happened, I would have still been carrying that wound around losing. And that would have absolutely, like I could tell you countless situations in my life where I just didn't even participate in things, or a really common one was my son wanted me to play like video games and stuff with him when he was little, and gaming and stuff wasn't really my thing. So also I would play anything with him if it didn't have a loser, but I wouldn't play anything if there was the opportunity for me to lose. And I didn't have conscious awareness of this. It was like as soon as he'd asked me to play a game where I might lose, all of a sudden I'd see the dirty dishes on the bench. That's a flight response. Making myself busy with this thing over here to keep me safe from that threat over there is a flight response. So that's something I would encourage our listeners to really think about is finish this sentence. It hurts me when. I feel frustrated when. I don't like it when. I get angry when. Like, if you can finish those sentences and write out a whole entire list of things and then go, okay, what's beneath that? Like, it might be, I feel hurt when my husband goes out with his friends and doesn't include me. Okay, cool. But what's beneath that? So is it that I feel like I'm not important? I feel like he doesn't love me. I feel like yada, yada, yada. Well, there you go. That's the wounds. And so when you go through that whole entire list of things, they're all going to point back to the same underlying core wounds. And everything that's happening in your life that triggers those wounds is simply the salt.
Oh, yeah.
But when we don't know about it, we take the bait every single time, baby.
Well, we've been raised that way. Our parents were raised that way.
How did we know any different?
Yeah, so we're sort of at this sort of junction where we're having an opportunity to do things differently. And so when you think about baiting, how was it used in your childhood? How was it used in your parents' childhood? Because if you come back to this idea that you have with the salt on an open wound versus pouring acid onto the same thing, it could probably go one of two ways when it comes to being raised. And there may be more. This is just a thought process that's come up. One way is that you're basically told that pouring salt onto someone's wound is like you're pouring acid onto them. So, for example, if you're triggering someone, it's your fault that you're triggering someone because it's being perceived or it's being taught to you as like you are just doing this to hurt me. And so
Exactly. Yeah.
when it comes to the child, it's sort of like you cannot do anything that triggers that wound because you're deliberately hurting me.
Yes.
Even though that open wound could be something that is in complete opposition to the child's desires, needs, or feelings, or whatever at that time. So
Yeah.
it forces them to push down, to shrink, to go within, to sort of go, I can't be a nasty person by having a voice. I can't be a nasty person by going, actually, I really need this and I need to speak up.
Yeah.
And so it can go that way. Or it could be the other way where you've just got a dynamic where everyone uses everyone's wounds to keep them in control. They'll prod.
And to get our needs met. And that, as you were sharing that, something that came to me, it reminded me of when my husband and I first started dating. He's not a phone person. Like literally today, he left his phone at home by accident because it's not at the front of his mind. And he has over 1,000 unread messages on his phone.
Gotcha.
Every single person who knows my husband knows, don't even bother trying to get him via phone. And sadly, it started to rub off on me because I am shocking with my phone these days too. But when we first started dating, I was very attached to my phone. I was very attached to needing the validation of the person being on the other side of it. Now, he works in oil and gas. Most of his work sites, he couldn't even take. He's on a water tank site at the moment, so phone's no problem. But when he's in oil and gas, he can't even take a phone onto the site. So if he's doing a 12-hour shift, he didn't even have his phone on him most of the time. And I would send these text messages, not realizing, like completely unconsciously, that I was trying to bait him into responding because I needed the validation. My wounding needed the validation of hearing from him or him, reassuring me or doing something. And it was almost like addictively checking my phone. But what it meant was like, if I saw he had read the message and then didn't reply for the rest of the day, I would be like, what an a-hole.
Left on red.
Yeah. Or if he started typing and then just disappeared, like I was literally in almost a constant trauma response. Anyway, we had this conversation one day and it was the first time I ever really recall a conscious part of my healing journey. This was right at the start. So this was 6 years ago. Where I said to him, I'm really aware that when you don't reply to me, I feel really, really vulnerable. I feel angry. I feel hurt. I feel all this stuff. And there was a huge part of me that wanted me to make it his responsibility to make me not feel that way by saying, you need to be better with your phone and you need to reply to me and you need to and you need to. And
well, if you loved me, if you cared for me, you would do this.
Exactly.
If you were a good person,
you know what was exactly. And you know what was wild? The voices in my support network at the time were the ones saying that to me. Oh, if he really cared about you, he'd make time to reply to your messages. If he really cared about you, you make time for the things you care about. Or, if you were important to him, he would respond. And this was the stuff that my friends were saying to me at the time. And look, there might be some validity in considering those things, but it doesn't take 100%. into perspective that it was my wounding that needed that constant validation from him and to hear from him in order for me to be okay. That's massive red flag number one. So the phone thing is nothing more than salt. That was hurting the hell out of a wounding that I had around rejection and abandonment. And I guess from there, also looking at the context of the fact, well, okay, that sounds lovely, except this dude's on a site where he can't have his phone for 12 hours. Like, what do you want him to do? Oh, I'm just going to go and drive outside of the site and check my phone for this chick that I might be dating. Anyway, so it was so enlightening to have greater awareness of, and to be able to actually just have that conversation, right? Like to be able to go, when this happens, this is what I feel. I'm not asking you to change anything. I want to share with you honestly though about what's coming up for me. And it was like I had to actually go cold turkey and breaking an addiction. It literally was like an addiction. That's crazy.
Well, it's been drummed into you. And look, everything that we've just sort of said, if you love someone, you'll want to support them. If you care for someone, you'll do things for them. These statements alone are not incorrect. It's just how they've been weaponized in the past to basically sort of go, like, I think the words that sort of come up when I think about that is, do you even know me? Do you even love me if I have to answer this question? Anytime I have to tell you I have a need, it means that you failed as someone who supposedly cares for me. So it's sort of weaponized to make the other person sort of have to constantly judge and maybe do more, right? But they have the validity. But when someone's triggered that way, so look, it's not sort of saying that you turn the other cheek every time, right? You don't sort of sit back and passively people please and go, well, I can't say anything for the fear of what if this happens, right? What if I say something and he makes me pay for it by never responding or adding another day to the response, right?
Get out. That's not a healthy relationship, my friends. That is dysfunction.
However, when you put out your needs, also be curious too, is there something that I could be doing in this?
Exactly.
Right? When you take these statements and say, yes, these statements are correct, how do you know you're using them in a weaponry way or how are you using them in a healing way?
Yeah.
It's you're being curious as to what you're presenting your needs, you're sharing your needs, and you're curious as in, do I have a part to play in this? Is there something in me that I could be looking at as well? So if you don't have the curiosity, you are weaponizing 100%, whether you like it or not, whether you're a good person or not, you're still weaponizing it. So put the curiosity in at the same time, and now, okay, let's see where this leads. And it's not going to be an instant thing. Like, I think, as you said, for you, it was like breaking an addiction. It's not like sort of, oh, shit, I've just realised I've got this issue. Oh,
and then never
copy,
feel anything about
select
it ever
file,
again.
delete. No, it's going to take a while to process through it.
It literally is. And that word process, I think, is so fundamentally important because that's what I call the work that I do with clients is it's processing. We are processing trauma. Now, some of that is at the mind and body level, some of it's somatic, all that kind of stuff. But also some of it's actually just doing it. Some of it is what the processing that happens in between sessions where when you get that text message or when you send something and you don't get a reply and you feel any sensations come up in your body, what are you doing with those sensations now? Because you don't get to play out the same behaviors expecting a different result. And so what part of my healing journey with taking the bait in a lot of this, so obviously step one was understanding and being able to recognize an invitation. And the second thing was because a lot of my stuff was around my phone. My ex-husband was really abusive via text messages. My current at the time, my current love interest was completely absent. And so that was via my phone as well. And so what I would do is if I ever got an invitation, let's say my ex-husband handed me an invitation to a really crappy party. And I was like, that party sounds not very fun. I don't think I want to go there. Because that sounds like drama and resentment and anger and all that sort of stuff. Being able to have the awareness of the invitation and the trigger, but then also sitting with what is this bringing up for me and making it okay. The feelings that are coming up are perfect. And anything that's coming up, I had to learn how to not shame it. And so there was a previous version of me that didn't have the capacity to sit in my feelings. All I wanted to do was make the feelings go away. And so I would defend myself. I would justify myself. I would argue. So I would go into fight or I'd go into flight, right? And over time, I learned, oh my gosh, I can actually process this without ever having to send it to him. Because you said right at the start of this show, it takes two. What if I take the second person out of it and simply sit with this on my own? And so what I started doing is every single time I got the chili, let's call this the chili or the acid texts, which generally, like, honestly, they were toxic and really, really disgusting. But instead of reacting and responding and defending and justifying, i.e. taking the bait, I would allow that thing to come in and stir up stuff inside of me, feel whatever it was I wanted to feel, and go to town. Like, I would write a response, like saying everything that I wanted to say, express everything I wanted to express, get all the emotion out and completely pour out till there was nothing left. I used to write literally essays. I had some that were like 4 pages of of just pouring out. And if I hand wrote it, then I'd go and burn it. If I wrote it in my phone, I'd cut it and paste it into a secure folder somewhere. Or I'd just delete it. Because the process of like being present with what I'm feeling and expressing it and pouring it out is the very thing that we need to do to be able to get it out of our nervous system and out of our body in the first place. So that's where I first learned, with no one even teaching me. It was just an intuitive thing. That's how I first learned how to process emotion and how to not take the bait. Going, oh, this is an invitation to a really crappy party. I don't think I want to go to that party, but I noticed that getting the invitation's bringing this stuff up for me. And so then I'm going to process all the stuff that it brought up for me and not engage in that and go, oh my gosh, I feel so much better now. I can clearly see they're just carrying on like a complete pork chop. But oh wow, I feel so much better now. I feel lighter. I feel more free. I can get on with my life. And after doing that for a little while, I could get 200 text messages a day of just vile abuse and get on with my day. I'd send one text that says, it seems like you're having a hard day. I hope you feel better soon. And that's it. I didn't engage anymore. Text after text after text came in and I didn't engage anymore. Because I had processed the emotion behind wanting to defend myself.
So important what you're sort of saying is that for me, when I started and I became aware, so a bit like yourself, if I was triggered, it was fight mode along the how dare you and who the fuck do you think you are, excuse me, like, walk over, crawl back kind of style. But then when you start to get a bit more awareness of it and you're becoming aware of your own triggers, it's normally part of a grander thing to sort of go, oh, okay, I'm being triggered. A healed person would not be triggered. So how do I get from where I am now being triggered to not being triggered? I went through the thing of, yes, I'll try and heal, but I wasn't healing quick enough. So then as I wasn't healing quick enough, I would be forcing myself into almost forced dissociation or even sort of forcing myself to not feel that because a healed person wouldn't feel that way.
Right.
And so
is that because shame behind that? Like shame that it wasn't, they're not enough.
Well, actually, it very well could. It very well could have been, but I was always in a rush to get to the good part.
Yeah.
So for me, I used to eat Oreos from the middle outwards, right? It's one of those things where now a big part of my healing journey is, David, slow down, take a look around, enjoy the journey, of which it's sort of been like, thank you, but no thanks. Yeah. Until it's sort of like, thank you and thank you. So that whole journey, if you're similar to what I'm going through or had been, well, still going through, to be honest, is that if you find that you're starting to project what a healed person would do as opposed to feeling what a healed person would do, that's also okay. Be patient with yourself as you go through. Like, I guarantee you didn't heal yourself over one text message, right?
No,
so it'll be 2, 3, 4,
It was about 8 to 10 months, I would say, that whole process from start of going, I am not doing relationship with this person like this anymore. I'm just not, I don't want to play this game anymore. It's exhausting. And that whole process of going, okay, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to keep doing this dysfunctional relationship and communication, to then being able to go, okay, now I want to be really transparent that there are still things in that past relationship that still reveal to me where I'm not emotionally free. However, the abusive texts, they don't impact me anymore. There's still behaviors where I feel let down, or I feel resentful, or I feel hurt, or whatever that might be. And that's an invitation for me to sit there and go, okay, what is it within me? Where am I not communicating? Where am I not upholding a higher standard? Where am I? And that's an ongoing journey, even all these years later. But when it comes to that particular thing about the really invasive, abusive text messages, that's completely not even a thing anymore. And because I stopped playing, I stopped taking the bait. How long are you going to fish in the same fishing hole, cast after cast after cast after cast, catching absolutely nothing before you go, I'm bored, I think I'll move on.
Tyres, those type of things.
Yeah. And so after a little while, what happened is the abusive messages just stopped, because it was no longer getting that reaction that fed whatever it was in him that needed that. And so the advice that I always give to people is, you quite often, it actually gets louder when you stop reacting to taking the bait. They will scream louder. The behaviors, the actions will ramp up. There'll be a period of escalation, because they are clutching at straws desperately, trying to get you to come and join them in the dance. They really want you to come to the party. And if you can navigate that period of escalation with the same grace and the same consistent response, eventually that last cast will go in, and you'll use your best, most enticing bait, and still there's no bite. You go, I'm done. I don't want to play this game anymore. It's boring. I'm not getting what I want out of it anymore.
They're now punching thin air as opposed to a punching bag.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And
there's no one
it's
to play
important
with.
It's important that you raise that, because you've said this in the past, that it's like levels, right? And so as you heal through a level, new level unlocked. And then after that, and I sort of went through, like, you look back and you have a situation where you go, geez, the previous version of me would have absolutely let rip.
Yeah.
This time I was actually calm, not because I had to force the calm, I had to regulate my calm. I was calm because I was calm. Now I could feel the butterflies, I could feel the energy in my body because I was being triggered. But there was also now this other thing sort of meeting it at the same time, sort of keeping me in a authentic state, which is, this is okay.
Yeah.
And then you go, great, I've now healed from this. Yoo-hoo!
Yeah.
Tick the box, scratch it off the list. And then, I don't know, a week later, a month later, a year later,
you go deeper, baby.
Something similar. It's like, hang on, I thought am I going backwards? No, new level unlocked.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when it does happen, you can handle it better. But there's this judgment that I felt, which is the one that really sort of kicked me in the ass, which was, I thought I'd healed this. Why am I having any trigger whatsoever? And that was the hardest part about that, coming back. So, and that's why I sort of say it's an evolving thing, and the layers, you just sort of unlock layers. And as you heal more, you can go deeper, but it doesn't mean it's going to be exponentially harder, because you've come at it at a much greater awareness and we'll say a higher vibration. So you can go deeper. If you went from 0 to 100, it'd be torture. But as you go down,
your nervous system would literally implode. It would tap out. You would be dead. And I think there's a couple of things. So the previous pastor at the church that we go to had said once, and it just absolutely grinded into my brain, God wants to take you further, but first he has to take you deeper. And what that meant for me was, in order for me to go further in my life, further in my relationships, further in my conscious parenting journey, further into, he has to take me deeper into the depths of my pain, into the depths of my wounding, into the depths of whatever is lurking in the deeper, darker parts. And, you know, the early healing days when you're doing all the surface stuff, that the stuff that you know is there, well, okay, all right, we can kind of move through that. You know what you know, exactly. But there's the 3 levels, right? There's the known knowns, there's the known unknowns, and then the unknown unknowns. And so when you start to unlock the unknown unknowns, all of a sudden there is this mindset shift to go, I am so grateful for the triggers. I am so grateful for the people, the places, the circumstances, the situations, the invitations to reveal to me, to bring the unknown unknowns into the knowns, because only then can I go further. And that is super profound to me, because I don't see triggers as bad things. I absolutely feel the intensity of the emotions in the triggers. I absolutely find, you know, I experience discomfort just like every other person, but I see those triggers as absolute gifts, almost like my spiritual teammates that are being used, that are partnering with me to reveal to me where I'm not emotionally free. And I think that's super profound. The second thing I was going to say on that is how flippin' frustrating I found it early on when people would say things like, you have the power of choice. Just don't take the bait. And I want to touch on that, because it's not as simple as just not taking the bait. It's not. And I feel like, you know, we have the power of choice. We can just choose a healthier response, is complete and utter BS, because it denies the fact that we are still flesh beings with a human nervous system. And it's not as simple as simply choosing, because if it was as easy as choosing to do things differently or better, we'd just do it. No one would have problems. It'd be super easy. But what we have to do is to be able to navigate it and recognize, yes, there's truth, like what you were saying about there can be truth in a statement, but are we weaponizing it? Because yes, it can be true, the power of choice. Yes, we have a choice in everything. I could have chosen to leave my first husband sooner. I could have chosen to set a boundary with that, or do this differently, or say this instead. But my nervous system was behaving in the exact way that it needed to behave in order, or it thought, in order to keep me safe. Now, it kept me in a relationship because it was scared of being alone. Okay, maybe I got some things to process there, that my nervous system wants me to be in a toxic relationship because the idea of being alone is simply so scary. But that's what I kind of wanted to encourage people with is, yes, we do have the power of choice. That is true. And it's also true that you're not ready. If you can't make that different choice, you're not ready to make that different choice. And so what's the work you need to do to be able to process the fears, to be able to process the trauma, to be able to process the shame, to be able to process any guilt or anything, to then be able to have that level of inner power, that personal empowerment, to then be able to execute and implement that choice. Because until then, we are literally just puppets, our nervous system, you know, driving the boat.
So 2 big points you've made there. The thing about choice, you're exactly right, from a top-down approach, and the top being your completely, fully healed version of yourself that you may or may not reach in this lifetime. We'll say higher self, right? Mm-hmm. It's looking down and going, this actually is a choice. So 100% it is a statement. Yeah. When it's used without the acknowledgement of the wounding that you came here to learn through, then it is simply, at this point, I don't think it's weaponizing, it's 100% bypassing. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's sort of going, I'll take a statement and then go, well, you get to choose. Because yes, you do get to choose to be a victim to this scenario, or you could choose to heal through this. Mm-hmm. Again, follow your intuition and you will lead your way out. There's,
Yeah.
Rule books being created as we speak, or manuals being created as we speak, but it's all within yourself if you can allow your intuition to let you through.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's allowing yourself to process it, because I don't know if in the moment when you're triggered, you're thankful for it, but I'm very rarely thankful for a trigger when I'm in it.
When I'm in it, no.
I mean,
no,
at
sir,
best,
no.
at best when I'm triggered, I can let out again? It's more like holy fuck, am I triggered? And I can hear myself going, right, if I've got real big desires to do this, and this. And then the curiosity kicks in, right? And the curiosity goes, is it possible, David, that you're acting out of ego? And it's like, oh, shut up. Let me feel this way. Oh, what am Okay, David, is it possible that you're triggered at the moment? Yes, I'm triggered because that asshole.
Yes.
Right? And then, as that's, and this is an internal dialogue. Welcome to David. I should not be doing a movie called Inside Out 3. And then, as it comes down, and then as I'm processing that anger, because before, and this is really important, this is where I found it challenging when I was in that moment of processing, because again, processing meant I was allowing it out while still remaining curious. Mm-hmm. That to me was, I knew I was processing. When that really big emotion had full and complete control and did not allow me to be curious, it meant I was feeding it. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's how I knew the difference between the two of them. So, a bit like, what you said, you got to scream, you got to belt something, but you're not belting the person that's triggered you. You're almost sinking into it. And I even have a visual now. If something's being triggered, I visualize myself dropping into it like it's a big thing of water.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And I'm just in it. What is this showing me? Right?
Yeah.
And if it's showing that I need to yell, I'll yell in a safe environment, of course. But it's not because I'm yelling at someone. I'm yelling through this emotion. If I need to punch something, there's a punching bag downstairs. I'll punch through the emotion. If I just need to pace, if I just need to whatever it is, or if I need to sit there and feel really fucking hurt by the fact that that person made me feel that way, while realizing they did something, I made myself feel this way because of something else that has come up.
Yeah.
And then cry.
Because that's revealed the wounding that's unhealed within you. Yeah, absolutely.
And then later on is where you can smile. You can chuckle.
Yeah.
You can be thankful for the fact of, didn't know that one was there. Where are you hiding?
Something else, as you were sharing that, reflected my own growth, where when I was at the triggered point is where I would reach out to my friends and my support network. And at that triggered point, I would want to rant, I would want to vent, I would want to unload and unleash. And I was looking for them to validate me and
You were
reassure.
recruiting.
I was absolutely recruiting. And so when I wanted to go, so-and-so, he said this and he said that, and he's such an a-hole and this happened and that happened, yada, 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 I was recruiting. And one of my really close friends, who I'm still close to this day because we have a healthy relationship, she actually said to me once, she goes, Ash, what do you want from me? Like, what do you actually want me to say to that? And I was like, oh, wow. It was the first time I had a realization where I'm like, wow, I actually want you to say that he's an a-hole and that I deserve so much more than this and all this. And I was like, whoa. And so something that, as you were sharing that, I can see how the versions of me have shifted and changed, that it's very rare that I go into that. People close to me will often say to me, oh, but we only ever get the processed version. And it can feel like they're not in the loop, maybe. Because it's very rare that they get this is happening in real time, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I'm going through, and this is what I'm thinking, and this is what he said, and this is what she said, and this is what happened. Because now I have the capacity to be able to, for the most part, there are exceptions to this, but for the most part, I have the capacity to be able to be the observer and still allow myself to fully feel and to process and to go there. And like the ranting and the venting and all that stuff happens. It's just that I don't need a third party to come and be a part of it to validate it. I can honor the experiences that I'm actually having, and instead I'll do it in my car. I'll rant, I'll vent, I'll cry, I'll get it all out. And then once I've done that, I've got the clarity that you were talking about. I've got the capacity to be able to sit there grinning like a Cheshire cat going, oh, that's why that had to happen for me. Oh, that's why that happened and what I needed to learn. And this is what I've got to do instead. And that is where I go to my friends then, and I'll share about the journey I've gone on to get to that point. And that's been a real shift, because now my close relationships are not the ones of the ranting and venting, because I don't want it. I don't want to connect with someone at the level and the frequency of that kind of emotion. I just don't want to. It's actually completely, to me, unhealthy. But now being able to go, oh, this is what I navigated, and this is what came out the other side of it. This was my learning. Oh, give me those relationships.
Yeah. And look, and I think there's what you're sort of saying, like there's the unhealthy version of this, which is alcohol-fueled recruiting, right? This person, see it from my point of view,
Yeah.
I need you to hate that person. I need you to feel sympathy for me. It's that sort of recruitment drive. But there's the other pit, which is sort of, or the other bit I should sort of say, because I think you and I fairly similar in how we process. We tend to do a lot more of it alone.
Yeah.
But we're not the rule. It's not like this is the only way to do it. Yeah. Even though this podcast, you got two people almost doing it the same thing. We're both seeing the 6, not the 9.
Yeah.
But there are other people who are outwardly, they need to process with people, and maybe not one person, they need to process with many people. And so that's also okay, so long as you're sort of picking people that you feel better in a way, which sort of means you feel a bit lighter after you're talking to them, not necessarily where you're recruiting them onto your side, right? If you need to regulate with someone, that's also okay.
Yeah, although I caution that, because if you're regulating based off validation, then it's not real. You're simply having the same dysfunction validated. And, I had a perfect example of this recently where a friend of mine said, I was having this experience in my relationship, and I spoke to this friend about it, and her response was, leave him, like, get out of there. And she's kind of evolving, whereas the other friend isn't evolving on that same pathway with her, and was saying that from her place of her own relational wounding. And there's a previous version of her that would have wanted to connect at that level, and I can see the same thing in my past as well. So what that taught me is that it's very kind of early in your healing journey, absolutely okay to want to process out loud and want to be seen and heard and understood. And that's where talk-based therapy can be absolutely so fundamentally helpful and valuable. My approach is not about that processing out loud as such, but more about getting curious, learning how to be the observer so that you can be self-empowered to then be able to have the tools, have the resources, know how to move through these things that are coming up without needing to depend on someone else hearing us in order for us to be okay. And I think there's certain stages along our healing journey. Even, like I said to you, there's some things like when I have anything coming up for me around sexual trauma, it's too big for me to process on my own. I have practitioners that I will go to, that I will talk to if anything like that comes up. That's really heavy for me. And more recently around my my body, my weight, my relationships with that sort of stuff, because I've finally been able to go deep enough to go, oh, okay, that's too big for me.
Gotcha.
I'm not ready to go there alone yet. And so again, I have brought in someone, but not someone who will sit there and just let me process out loud, someone who will actually take me by the hand and lead me into, I guess, what you were talking, like we talked about a few episodes ago about the city, the scary city. Lead me through that city of grief and shame and trauma to get out the other side.
And I think the
really
difference
important.
between recruiting and someone helping you process or regulate is that if the person or the people that you're with can hold space.
Yes. And if you have an expectation of what they should say.
Yes. Then if you've come in with a right or wrong answer, you're not regulating. You're just you're recruiting.
Yeah.
If the people around you can hold space, they can make you feel seen and heard, while also, if it's appropriate, allow you or encourage you to be curious. These are signs of healthy processing together, right?
Yeah.
If you come in with a preconceived idea of a good friend will do this and a shit friend will do that, then it's recruitment and it's something to validate the trauma. And if you want to validate the trauma, go ahead. It really is a choice at the end of the day. But if you're wanting to go the opposite way, then that trauma, that trigger is already making you feel pretty rat shit.
Yeah.
And being curious about it is going to make you probably feel a little bit more rat shit. But once you process it or you start going through that, it feels that little bit less instantly. It's a little bit less.
Yeah.
Then a little bit less, a little bit less. You're still incredibly heightened. It's not like the emotion falls off a cliff. I mean, the only times I've found that I could have that type of pent up energy is when I've got massive energy, massive crying, and then your energy kind of falls off a cliff. But, generally it's a little bit by little bit.
Yeah.
If you're co-regulating with someone but again, you just got to go with your gut feeling.
Yeah,
You've got the
absolutely.
best. You already have the answers within you. It's just unlocking it. And so it's not like having people to tell you what to do. If you don't resonate with it, you don't resonate with it. There are some things that have worked for other people. That's what we're sharing. That's what we're doing here. So, but yeah, for Ash and myself, and there might be others that resonate a bit more, we sort of heal a little bit more solo.
Yeah.
And that's fine as well.
Yeah. I love it. I think that's a powerful ep. If you have any questions, comments, what did this bring up for you? We would love to hear from you. As always, we don't get paid for this, but we absolutely know that there is so much value in this if you've made it this far. For those of you who have followed from the very, very start, we are so grateful. Share it. There's so many ways you can help us for free, which is sharing our content, inviting others, liking it, giving us comments. Tell the algorithm that what we're putting out is actually making a difference in the world, and we will be super duper grateful.
And we love doing it.
Yeah.
And until next week, we'll put our fishing hats away, put the bait back in the freezer, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye.